Now, the Competition Commission says South Africa needs to establish mandatory certification of solar panel installers. This after receiving complaints from consumers. But this comes after 2023 solar boom, when households and businesses were desperate to find alternatives to Eskom's unreliable supply. Today, we look into the prospect of a better regulated renewable sector, and Business Day's energy writer Denene Erasmus joins us with that. Denene, thank you for your time and good afternoon.
Hi, nice to join you.
This feels like a bit of a late move. I'm wondering, if we have too much solar already installed for us to go back and regulate in hindsight.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've spoken about this previously, that we saw this massive increase in installations last year, 2,600 megawatt installed, which is about half of the total rooftop solar that South Africa has installed at the moment. And going forward, there is an expectation that will sort of decrease by about half this year, and we'll probably see the same trend going forward. But yes, so this problem has been around for a while, and now the competition watchdog has caught up with the survey that it recently did into the sector specifically for households and businesses. I think important to note that there are regulations in place. So it's not as if a new regulatory environment or permitting system needs to be rolled out. Contractors do have to be registered. The problem is there's non-compliance. So households and businesses that do install systems really should take the responsibility to check whether the installers that they use are registered as they should be, it's really just about better enforcing the regulations and registration regime that is already in place.
Whose job was it to be the watchdog? Like you said, that there are regulations in place, but we've obviously not done that as best as we can.
So I think the point that the Competition Commission makes as one of the conclusions that it draws from the survey is that they want mandatory registration, which would arguably make it easier for consumers to know that they are working with registered suppliers. But again, as with all these things, it does go back to the consumer having to take some responsibility for checking. And there is the solar PV industry of South Africa through SAPVIA has developed what they call the PV Green Card, and that's basically a register on the website where any individual has access to go and check if the installer that they are using or the supplier that they are using to install solar PV, whether they have gone through the controls that's been set up for this PV Green Card system. So definitely already there are mechanisms in place that consumers can use to make sure that they are not being done in by fly-by-night installers.
Then let's talk about the issue of excessive pricing here. We know that, anytime there's a crisis like the one that we've seen, it's bound to be increased demand, and that's about to drive prices up. But of course, the question of excessive pricing is a different question altogether.
So this is something that the Competition Commission is also starting to look into now. They say they have received some complaints about collusion and excessive pricing in the industry, which they are investigating. They are not yet talking about sort of an industry-wide inquiry, but they are definitely hoping that through publishing this survey into the market for solar PV for households and businesses, that they would create more consumer awareness and then maybe get more complaints so that they can get a better idea of whether there is enough proof to really say that we are seeing collusion between installers, between suppliers in the market.
Another interesting thing here is, I guess, where the solar market is concerned, there's been a lot of importing, and I think that's bound to drive up costs quite a bit. It was always going to be, based on that model, based on the lack of local production, it was always going to be something that was possibly excessively priced and out of reach for many South Africans.
Yes, although I mean, we do know that we are looking at supply-demand dynamics as with any product, and I think now that this big boom is behind us, and now that we are seeing some moderation and normalization in the market, already we are seeing suppliers looking at offering cheaper alternatives, so that it is not only accessible to high-income earners. And I think generally worldwide, we have seen a trend of solar panels becoming cheaper and more accessible. So definitely affordability as we stand now is still a problem. And it will become more difficult to really find the balance between, on the one hand, we know government is trying to look at developing a local supply chain for renewable energy in the country. That's why we saw, for example, the implementation of the 10% tariff on imported solar panels earlier this year. So on the one hand, trying to support a local industry, but on the other hand, also one of government's imperatives is trying to widen and improve access to alternative options, such as solar panels and other energy options for lower income households as well.
And then, of course, Denene, with this solar boom came less load shedding, and we welcome that. Yesterday, we saw the GDP print. I'm quite dissatisfied with that number based on how little load shedding we had there. What are your thoughts on that one?
I think, as many economists have said, we are going to have to wait a bit to see a longer term impact. So for the Q2 numbers, that was a full quarter without load shedding. But I think at the time, many of us, me included, were still sort of very reluctant to really believe that this was a long-term and sustained change in terms of load shedding. What the Reserve Bank said, interestingly, last week in an engagement with journalists, is what we can expect in the coming months is to see multiple benefits from the end of load shedding. For example, in yesterday's GDP figures, we already saw a bit of a lift from the utilities sectors, where as there's more electricity available, more is getting sold, so that's bigger income from utilities. But also we will start to see perhaps a bit of an impact on inflation as we've got less load shedding, and especially in the food value chain, both on farms and processors now having to make now less reliant on buying diesel to run generators. So that might sort of start to filter through a bit in sort of slightly tempering our food price increases. So yes, I think it was a bit disappointing. What we saw in the reading was just slightly below what the consensus forecast was, but generally the expectation is that we are going to see more benefit from this in quarters to come, and perhaps a much more a much larger jump in 2025 as we see a sustained improvement that businesses can really bank on.
Well, I know myself and many South Africans looking forward to that, Denene. Thank you for your time. Always a pleasure having you with us. That was Denene Erasmus, energy writer for the Business Day.